Hello, my friend, and welcome to Courageously Curious. Today's guest is Paige. Paige is a kindergarten teacher in Korea, and we speak about the high academic pressure that Korean kids face from the age of 3 or 4 onwards in the academic system. We speak about the low birth rates, how men and women interact in Korea, and about Paige's first-hand experience with Korean culture after having lived there for 3 years. I hope you find it interesting. It is far off from what I've spoken about before on this channel, but it is in line with my mission to just speak and learn about everything that I am curious about and interested in. And so I hope that you will find it interesting as well. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the following conversation. How does a classic day look like for you?
Usually a classic day is going to work, teaching classes for my main class until 2:30 p.m. So starting at like 9, teaching till 2:30, and then I have after school classes until about 4:45ish, and then we have about 45 minutes to get ready for the next day basically. But today was a bit different because it was the last day of the school year for my kids. So it was a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of final things and then I'm changing classrooms. So I had to take all of my stuff upstairs and my co-teacher had to take everything she needed upstairs and move everything around. So, but quite a
Oh,
busy
yeah.
day today.
So the school year ends in February
Yeah,
for
so the
you.
typical school year starts March for, I think, for elementary school as well. They have quite a long break I've seen for the elementary schools, but we finish February, the 6-year-old classes, and then they move on to 7-year-old in March.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And how how did you come to be a kindergarten teacher in South Korea? How did this come about?
Well, I wanted to move to South Korea, and one of the easiest ways is through teaching. And I also enjoy teaching, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to try it out, move overseas. And a lot of people find jobs through either there's private academies, so hagwons, or these are technically hagwons, but they're during the day, so they're kindergarten. The hours are nicer, so I wanted to work kindergarten. Um, so yeah, I basically just applied and then I was able to get this job. And often you go through recruiting agencies is the best way to do it. Probably the safest way as well.
And the I think Hagwons, you said they are what exactly?
So hagwons are the after school academies that elementary, middle, high schoolers will do. They're typically, I believe their hours are 1 till 8 or 3 till 10 p.m. So they go quite late into the
Oh,
evening.
wow. And this is this private education technically, or is that a branch of public education? How does that work?
So hagwons, as well as where I work at kindergartens, they're technically private academies. Um, Technically mine isn't under the government, it's not a kindergarten because it's in English. It's considered a private academy. Um, if it were to be an actual kindergarten, you can't actually have English teachers there because of
Okay.
our visa type. So they're considered hagwons, but during the day.
Okay. Yeah, I read there's such a race to get people to get these children ready and educated as early as possible, and that
Mm,
the pressure on the kids has become so high that it's been forbidden to teach them English like before a certain age, and that they've restricted school hours to I think stop at like 10 p.m. Is that
mm.
true? And what is your experience been with that?
So I've heard a lot about that happening. I had some friends who work in the after-school Hagwon systems. We haven't noticed too much effect with the kindergartens. Often the schools are quite good at rewording what we're teaching to send to the government. we teach everything in English, so mine has been okay, but a lot of the parents, there's a lot of online forums pushing for the work to be harder and harder and harder for these kids. So we're
Wow.
teaching, I think some of the students, like my class is 6 years old. I'm probably teaching topics that are maybe first, second, third grade level English,
Wow.
to really, really young children. And I honestly think that some schools are actually just getting more sneaky rather than actually changing anything that they should be. I've heard that after school are just kind of pushing the teachers to do things that they shouldn't quite be. Luckily not at my school, but other schools are just they're just getting sneakier rather than actually changing.
Yeah. So education in South Korea is kind of like drugs in other countries where you forbid it and then people find ways around it and it goes underground, really? Is that a fair
Yeah.
description?
Yeah, I would definitely say I've noticed a bit of that happening, that it's instead of changing too much, there's been other things that kind of outlaw it. I've seen that there's been policies that they've introduced, but then they've changed something else that completely overrides it. Um, so it's been quite an interesting thing, like quite a big topic of discussion between teachers.
Okay. In your regular scheduled hours, like how would you say differs what you teach and how you teach in South Korea from like a traditional kindergarten in New Zealand, where you're from, for example?
Oh yeah. So I here I teach very similar to what I used to tutor back in New Zealand. I teach stuff that I would be teaching to, yeah, second, third year students. And it's almost like I'm just teaching a normal school day rather than a kindergarten back in New Zealand is a lot more play based. I don't have time for play. My students this year are actually not really good at crafts because we never had time to make anything. It was bookwork, bookwork, bookwork. They're reading chapter books now, some of my students, where I think when I was a kid, I couldn't even read that until I was maybe 9.
How old are your
Yeah.
students?
My students are, so they're Korean age 6, but they're actually, my students that have just left me, they were 5 this
Because
year.
they,
They've
they
just turned
calculate the
5.
age differently, right?
Yeah, they calculate it based off the year that they were born. Um, Technically, the Korean age doesn't exist anymore, but it's been so longly used here that they still use it in the school systems.
Okay, so they're 5 years old and they sit
Yeah,
in front of books all day and
yeah,
study and read long texts, and there's no time for play or for a sense that there's no time for embodiment, for getting to learn how how you move your body in the world and how you interact with other people.
mm,
And I think probably
yeah,
every kindergarten teacher or like someone working in the pedagogy in Europe or like in New Zealand probably just gets shivers because they're like, what the hell are they doing? And
yeah.
how are the social skills of your students? How do they interact with each other?
The social skills have definitely been a difficult thing for me. My co-teacher and I made it a big thing from the beginning that we didn't want to make them just smart students. We wanted to make them sociable. A lot of the students at almost every school in Korea is a only child. So it's very difficult to teach them. You have to be nice and
Oh
share
yeah.
because they're just taught I can get whatever I want, especially in the area that I live in because it's a very wealthy area. They quite often are just used to getting whatever they want. Um, so it's constantly a battle of teaching them to say things nicely, to do things nicely, to move around the classroom without walking into your friend. If you hit your friend, you have to say sorry. They often would just like bump and then they just keep walking. So it was a long year of trying to teach them those social skills, but it was quite difficult to because in my head I think that's what you learn from a very, very young age, but
Yeah,
they just
yeah.
they just lacked so much of it.
Yeah, well, I guess if they don't, if they don't have siblings and they're not exposed to other children on a regular basis, then when they come into kindergarten, it's also the first time that they're regularly, like on a daily basis, exposed to other kids.
Mm,
And they can only learn these social skills there. And if they don't do it there, then there's a skill that is necessary for interacting well with other humans and for navigating personal interactions and navigating conflict that sort of gets not, it just doesn't get learned, right?
yeah, it's definitely something they're just struggling to learn, especially because they're also navigating it in a foreign language.
True.
Some of my
Oh my god, yeah,
students,
true.
yeah,
Holy crap.
some of my students are much better at communicating their feelings, especially to me and my co-teacher. They're actually better at explaining it in English than they are in Korean. Um, in the beginning, they were a lot better at understanding what they had done wrong when my co-teacher would explain in Korean. But near the end of the year, they would kind of just block it out if she tried to explain it in Korean. It had to be said in English. So it was quite a big juxtaposition. My co-teacher and I found that quite a hard balance. And at my school specifically, the whole class stays together for all 3 years of kindergarten. So they're only really used to each other and they spend time at other things
Okay.
outside of school together. So they're still not developing enough, from my opinion, but it's
It's
kind of a hard topic for them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that they can then only do the social stuff and social skills in English. And to be fair, I've noticed this in myself. Like English is not my native language, but
Mm,
when I went to university, everything was in English, and so everything that's sort of intellectually challenging discussion I learned to do in English. And so it's easier for me to do this in English than in German because I have the whole context window around this
mm,
is in English. And so when they learn how to interact with other people, but only learn the vocabulary and the mannerisms and all that stuff in another language, then then it makes sense that they would struggle with it in their own. Do
mm.
you think do you think the fact that they don't get time to play and that they learn the limited social interactions that they have in a foreign language, do you think that plays a part in the fact that society is very atomized and that they have very difficult relationships between men and women, for example?
I do feel like there must be some correlation between it. I even noticed that just like when I'm outside observing, when I go out and I'm around, other adults, and the way that they interact or do things is very much they're used to so many people. And I know that in, New Zealand culture, like if you bump into someone, even if the other person doesn't realize, you'll say like, "Oh, sorry," and you just keep going.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in Korea. You might hear them say sorry, but usually you bump and you keep going. I noticed that even like my students, they learned to do that because I taught them to do that because you know, I think that's great etiquette. But it kind of there's like those social differences, and so it makes those interactions a little bit more difficult for them, I think. And I think as they grow older, I hope that they retain that sort of stuff, but it's kind of difficult. I think there's such a big gap between what they learn as kids and what they learn in the Korean society. So I'm not sure whether it's going to change much because I've also heard a lot of students will do these sort of English academies when they're younger, and then once they get to high school, they don't use English ever again. There's
Oh
many that
wow.
they'll understand English, but they won't speak it. They won't remember how to speak it because,
Okay.
yeah, it was that early childhood education, then they forget it all.
And you really focus on teaching them English and only English or other topics and then in English? Or is it both?
We do other topics in English, so we'll do it's called science and coding and math, but it's very simple stuff. The math, to my students especially, is very, very easy because they go to other academies afterwards as well. They're kindergarten students going to math academies, science academies, art academies, which doesn't help with their level of interest during the day because they're exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, can you walk me through a regular kindergartner's day in South Korea? Like from the
Yeah.
moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, hour by hour, what would their day look like?
Yeah, so for typical students that I have quite a few that go to a lot of academies. They will get up, they'll get on their shuttle bus. So they get a shuttle bus that's provided by our school. They come to school, they unpack, we teach them to unpack their bag, get ready for the day by themselves. And then once they are unpacked and ready, they sit down, have a snack, which is usually just milk. And then we start with English class, then we move to the next subject. I typically like to do 30 to 40 minutes per subject. To I have to get a lot done. Then
And
they have
what time
lunch.
is that? What time does school start? Sorry for
They
the
come in at
interruption.
9:30 and we start class about 9:45.
Okay.
And then we have classes till 12. At 12, we have lunch. They get about like 30 minutes to eat, brush their teeth, and clean up, and then we have playtime for 30 minutes. So if the weather is nice and the air is okay, we can go outside, which is great because they actually get time outside. But unfortunately, South Korea recently, the air has been really bad. So we've only had a few times to be able to play outside. And then we get straight back into classes again for another 2 hours. Oh no, hour and a half. Then they will have another snack time. Some of them will stay for after school at our school, but a lot of them will leave and they'll go to either math academies or art academies. Some of them will do soccer. Quite a few of my kids will do football, and or anything else. And I think some of them say they typically get home about 7, 8 p.m.
7, 8
Um,
p.m.
and then they'll have to do their homework. So we give them homework.
Okay.
And then I think my students, I've tried to ask them before, they're not always clear. They usually go to bed about 10 p.m., sometimes midnight, because they'll have,
Midnight, 10 p.m. to
yeah,
midnight for 5-year-olds.
yeah, they'll also have homework from their academies as well, or private tutors. I've got a couple students that have private tutors.
And that comes after your kindergarten, after the science, math, football, art academies, after the homework or during the homework comes the private tutor.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
For a 5-year-old, yeah.
Do kids ever express their dislike or their enjoyment, of the system and of the activities?
A couple students who definitely enjoy it. I have one student who is like, "Oh, I'm doing a new academy today, a new one," because she likes to try new things. But I do have some that are they just. I had one student at the beginning of the year who used to cry knowing that she had to go to football. She's like, "I don't want to do it. I hate it." So she would cry every time she had to go. Luckily, she did stop going, but they just seem so tired. And their parents will say that too. If we say, "Hey, look, your kids' test scores are going down," they'll say, "Oh, they're just tired." But we can't do anything. We need them to not be tired so we can get through what they want them to do during the day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's the parents' responsibility to make sure they sleep enough and they
Yeah.
have time to process all this.
Mm,
We talked earlier about social skills.
yeah.
What do you know about bullying in kindergartens, in schools, and the effect that that has on these kids?
Yeah, so I've actually seen we have a few students in the older years who have actually had some issues with them trying to bully their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, some of the younger classes as well, they will whisper mean things in Korean when the teachers aren't looking to the other students.
Mm-hmm.
And in my class at the beginning of the year, we also had issues with that sort of thing happening. Luckily, the students came to us and told us, so we were able to sort it out. But it often happens because parents will compare their kids and they will tell their kids, you have to do better than this kid, or you have to
Okay.
do the best in the class, you have to be the smartest kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues, and I've heard lots of stories about students at elementary schools and high schools facing it. And I can't remember the exact term for it, but there is actually a term for the person that's chosen to be bullied. And this has existed in
Mm.
Korea for years. I remember my Korean teacher back in New Zealand told me about it. It's basically like I think it was the king loser is basically what it translates to. It's the
This,
person that everyone's gonna bully.
the supreme loser. Well, that also creates an incentive to kind of get on board with the bullying because all you have to do is
Mm.
not be that person, right? All
Yeah,
you have
the
to do
goal
to
is
avoid the
to not
bullying
be
is
that
not be the
person.
supreme, like the bottom of the rank. And as long
Yeah.
as you're not that, then well, you should be fine. Which is a horrible incentive. Because
Mm.
I heard this story of. I'm sure you're gonna tell me how to pronounce the name correctly. Pyo Ye Rim.
But yeah, pure Yedem. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you already in Korea when that story played out? And can you tell us about it?
I can't remember if I was in Korea. I have heard a little bit about it. Um, so I believe she suffered years and years of bullying and it was just basically ignored. And that she was able to come forward and unfortunately it did result in her taking her own life years later. It unfortunately is very common. And it's also very common for students to suffer so much stress around test times that they will take their own lives because of it, because the system is just so difficult for them. Um, because of this bullying, um, apparently there's not much that actually teachers can do. Parents are able to even bully teachers. We are under so much like threat that if we even as teachers do anything that could be seen as harming a child, even just by maybe saying your child isn't smart enough, we could be harassed by parents. We could lose our
Oh,
jobs.
okay.
You can't do anything that's seen as isolating a child, but students do bully, but that's considered like natural almost. So bullying happens because it's seen as natural, but we're not allowed to do anything to isolate. So if we even isolate the person who is doing the bullying, the main
Mm-hmm.
culprit of it, we will be under fire, like
Oh
teachers,
wow.
Koreans and foreigners. We have had cases before where parents have threatened to sue. I've heard stories where of other schools as well where parents have threatened to sue or have sued the school because a child who was a bad behaved student was taken out of a class and left to think about their decision, which would be normal in other countries, but you can't do that here. That is
Wow.
seen as isolating and yeah, it's a very big, heavy issue that we constantly face.
You seem concerned about it and a bit yeah, a
Yeah.
bit taken aback. Do I read this right?
Mm.
What
Yeah.
does that do with you as a teacher when you know that you have to constantly kind of tiptoe around the classroom and make sure that you don't upset a child that might then tell its parents something that might or might not be true,
Mm.
and then the parents will come after you. How does that, well, what does it do with you emotionally, and how does it affect your ability to actually, well, effectively teach?
It's quite, it's slightly almost terrifying. I don't know if that's quite the right word. I have actually had a situation, luckily I wasn't threatened to sue or anything, but I actually have had a situation where something has happened to me. When I first started teaching in Korea, my first job that I had, I was training to teach a class that was already had a teacher, but that teacher was a manager who needed to do their role, so they hired me to take over the class. It was they have a day called Teachers' Day in Korea, where kids will give letters. Some schools you get presents. At the school I was working at, it was just cards and a thank you. I was given one, and I think I had known these students for maybe a week. So I was still trying to, check the boundaries that I had. Um, and then a few days later, I was called out of the class by the directors, and I was told in a private meeting by one of the directors that I was being pulled out of the class. I wasn't going to be teaching it anymore because I didn't uh, show enough appreciation for a card. So I was being taken out of my job because of a lack of appreciation.
Wow.
They they tried to make me part-time and I said actually no, I'm not going to be part-time. I haven't done anything wrong. Um, it turns out what had actually happened was the director hadn't officially told the class that I was the parents that I was taking over. So the parents didn't want a new teacher. They liked the teacher they had. So they took any way they could to complain and get rid of me. And they won because the parents win. Which it did kind of bite them back because they ended up getting a new teacher anyway. So they had three teachers instead of just two.
Yeah.
But that was a real scare for me because I thought I'm going to lose my job. I'm never going to be able to work in Korea again. It was
Yeah.
terrifying. I was fresh. I was quite young at the time. Um, I was glad that I fought back. And I stayed. I finished my contract at that job, went back to New Zealand, and then decided to give it a go again. So it definitely was quite scary, especially at the beginning of the year. I was scared that
Oh
any
yeah.
mistake I would make would mean I would lose my job. And I still do fear it sometimes, um, that I might say something wrong and a kid might go home and be like, they yelled at me, and the parents might fight back.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
That must be terrifying, and also like, yeah, it must somehow affect your ability to teach, because it seems like there's a there's an insanely strong incentive and pressure from the parents that they put on their kids because they think education is so important for success in that
Mm,
country, and it seems like the parents don't trust teachers to do the best job they can, and so they exercise an enormous level of control and basically only use the teachers not as someone that they can entrust their child to learn from, but as a means to an end, to get the most, yeah, to drill the most into their child and to make sure that their child doesn't fall behind.
yeah.
Would you say
It's
that's
this,
fair?
yeah, it's this weird sort of idea that their child has to be the smartest. Their child has to be the best. They have to get the best job to survive in this world, this economy. This, especially in Korea, if you want to work and live in Seoul, you have to be the best of the best almost to get a job. There's just so many people, but not enough jobs, and they want the best. They want jobs in the medical field or technology. You have to have these like high top jobs, so you have to start young. You have to start young, but then your kid, no, no, your kid's not, my kid's not average. My kid is above average. So if you're telling me my kid's average or below, clearly the teacher is wrong. But then instead their kid just needs a little bit longer to learn. They might not be below average, they're five. They just need a bit more time or a different
Yeah,
environment. But yeah,
yeah. As you said, they're 5.
yeah,
Yeah, kids are very different. But I mean, to take the opposing view for a second, you said that it's very difficult to get high-paying jobs. If you want to live in Seoul, you have to be, like, the best of the best. Is the pressure that parents put on their kids just a sort of rational consequence or a logical consequence of the social incentives and of the economic and employment situation that exists in Seoul or in South Korea? Is it actually the case that if you don't have a 1% job, that you are gonna suffer a lot because you don't have enough money? Like, what is the reality behind this pressure?
yeah. It's definitely, you can survive in Korea without having such a high-paying, successful job. Plenty of people have, normal. I mean, a teacher's job isn't the most well paid in Korea. It's not as competitive as it used to be. It used to be very competitive, but now because it's a very lucrative job. A lot of people want it. They want to come to Korea. They don't up the pay as much as they used to get people to come to teach English, but you can survive very easily on normal paying jobs, but it's the social pressure and the family image. Family image is everything. And it stems from Confucianism still, that honoring your family, continuing to show success for your family and your upbringing, it's still so rooted in Korean culture. And so these parents still continue to push it, even if they are trying to be more modern in Korean society. It's this constant social pressure that you have to have the top jobs, you have to be working at these companies. So a lot of parents will send their kids to international schools or international universities, because if you go to the international universities, or if you go to I think there's three major universities in Seoul that are quite highly looked at. If you don't go to one of those, they see it as you're not going to get a good enough job.
Okay. So the pressure stems more from social norms and from traditional views on what's good and what's important than from an
Mm.
underlying economic reality that forces people to get these jobs.
Yeah, it's image. A lot of it is image.
Okay. And has this social pressure changed at all in the years you've been there? I don't how long have you been there? I'm sorry, I didn't even ask at the beginning.
Overall, like combined, I went home for 8 months in 2024, but I've been combined about 2 years here. I did a little bit of research on Korea before coming here while at university. So I know a bit about, especially the philosophical side, the Confucianism side, um, because that was one of my main interests back at university. But you definitely, it's progressed a lot more even in the last year. The 8 months that I was gone, so much has already continued to develop, and it's almost it was starting to become less about image, and then I'm not sure what happened, but I've come back and it's very rampant now. It's
Okay.
social pressure is so much in Korea now.
Talking about social pressure, from what I've read and listened to and learned, there's an incredibly high social pressure for for women to get married and have children in Korea,
Mm,
um, and it gets increasingly high as they get older, which might not be, unique to Korea. You have the same thing in like many countries, but it seems to be uniquely high in Korea.
mm.
What is your experience with that, and how do you see this?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Women in Korea don't want to get married. They don't want to have children. There's so much pressure for these families to be perfect. They want to have careers. They want to develop on their own. Everyone wants to get very settled and financially ready. Because in Korea, having children is expensive, likely because of this system of, the best schools, the best getting them their education really strong. Um, I I haven't noticed too much personally, much of a difference. I've heard a lot about it. The family's very much for especially men. It's actually a lot stronger for men, what I've heard, is that they
Okay.
don't want them to marry foreign women. They want them to marry Korean women.
Okay.
They want to continue that Korean bloodline. Um, so yeah, I haven't really noticed too much with women. A lot of the females I interact with are sort of just like, I'll have my fun when I'm younger and I'll get married in my 30s
Okay.
and I'll have kids if I have to have kids. But they all want to build their career first.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like I think you're right that it basically goes in both directions, right? It's expensive to raise children because
Yeah.
the pressure to get them highly educated is so large, and then once you have finished your education and you have built your career, you're a bit older than you might have been otherwise. Then it's more difficult to actually find someone to have kids with, which is quite important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then you also need to have the money to actually finance this education again. So
Mm.
yeah, it's okay. I see where the cycle is, and what you said right now about not them not wanting their daughters or their sons to marry someone outside of Korea. Is that a norm that is critically reflected on inside Korea, or is it just generally accepted as something totally normal?
It's very accepted as normal. I have, there has been many people that I've even talked to, just socializing, or even if you go out to bars and you talk to people, um, Korean men will see foreign women as just very easy, something to have fun with because they see our society as like, oh, that's normal for you. Um, so I'll do that while I'm young, or I'm in my 30s before I find a Korean woman and get settled down. Especially if they're the oldest son. If they're the youngest, it's kind of okay. But if they're the oldest or only son, it's socially normal to say, no, you cannot marry a
Wow.
foreign woman. You need to marry Korean to continue the Korean line.
Yeah, it's so interesting how different cultures reflect on different standards. Because, for example, if you were in Belgium, where I'm from, or in Germany, uh, and you would say to someone, "No, you have to marry someone white and German," like people would be like, "Whoa, slow down, buddy! Like this is
Yeah,
crazy what you're saying, right? You tell me
yeah,
I can't marry someone from Italy, or I can't marry someone
yeah,
from America, or I can't marry someone from I don't know from Colombia. What the hell? Like
yeah,
this is going into a very dangerous direction."
yeah,
But it seems like in a country like South Korea, this is totally accepted, and it it seems to reinforce the notion that beliefs that yeah we think very critically of are totally normal in other countries, um,
yeah,
espe- especially when it comes to exclusionary thinking and that stuff.
yeah. There's even been, I'm not sure 100% how true this is, but quite often my friends and I will talk about dating and, what people are interested in. Quite often, there's apparently a lot of rumors that Korean women want Chinese men
Okay.
because Korean men are kind of like cheap and they just want to have fun, or they just want to, they work such long hours, they just want to go drinking, go home. They're boring. And there's a stigma that Chinese men spend more money. So Korean women want that. They want
Okay.
someone to, give them the lifestyle that they want. Don't want to have to do as much. So there's kind of that stigma that apparently Korean women want Chinese men. And then I think there's been other ones that like Chinese women don't want Chinese men, and that Japanese women don't want Japanese men. So it's this kind of like discussion that we have. I don't know how 100% true that is, but it's
Yeah.
definitely kind of a rumor that you hear going around a lot.
Yeah, well, part of it might be just, the grass is always green on the other side.
Yeah.
That you always that you dislike the familiar because of it's what you've always known, and something else is some more is and something else is more appealing, and it's more novel, and it's exciting.
Mm,
Um, and it may also be that the Chinese men that Korean women have access to are usually wealthier Chinese men, because if they weren't
yeah.
wealthy, they wouldn't have access to Korean women.
Yeah.
It's
Very likely.
it may be maybe some of that. How is the relation in general, the relationship between Korean men and Korean women, and
Yeah, so
is there a lot of tension?
I don't find too much tension. It's definitely the younger generation is definitely like you have when they're younger, they have pockets of friendships. So university, they'll be boy and girl friendships. But usually you notice there's more um, groups of like girls, groups of boys. If there's men and women together in these sort of younger age groups, they tend to be in really large groups. You don't often find a boy and like one boy, one girl hanging out. There might be more of it, but usually if you are out in public and you see a man and a woman, you just assume they're in a relationship. Because
Okay.
I find that, I mean, back home in New Zealand, I'm not sure about other places, but you can have a boy and a girl who are just friends, and you won't assume if you see them out in public, oh, they're dating. But in Korea, it's usually if it's one man, one woman, they're dating, or maybe siblings, but generally it's dating. You get pockets of groups.
How popular and how widespread is the 4B movement actually in Korea?
So I haven't really personally seen much of it. I've heard about it, but I think I heard about it more when I was in New Zealand than when I was here.
Okay.
The things that I've seen more of are actually have actually been protests for um, abortion. So people protesting the uh, legalizing abortion in Korea.
Okay, because at the moment it's outlawed.
Yeah. So I believe it's allowed now. I think it was outlawed, and I think they have legalized it. I could be wrong on that, but I've seen during a lot of the talk of that, there's certain areas where a lot of people will protest. Um, a lot of church groups will go out and protest, and it was all to make it illegal again, make sure it or stays illegal.
Okay.
So
So
yeah,
both
it's
both pro and contra, sort of.
yeah, you there's a lot of it's very like two opposite groups. You have the very um, m make sure that, children are born, um, anti-abortion, very heavily church groups. Then you have the other side, which is no children, no marriage, nothing. Um, very women's rights. It, there's it's such big differences. There's not really a middle ground.
Okay. That's probably not easy to navigate if there's no common denominator. And I mean,
Yeah.
Korea has had a long history of sort of population control measures. Correct me if I'm
Mm.
wrong, but I read while researching this that I think between like 1960 and 75, 60 and 80, the state supported sterilization for men and women, so that because they had a population that was increasing too fast, they would basically support people getting sterilized. Um, and that also led to the low birth rate that we see now. Do you know anything about this? Can you tell me
I actually
if
haven't
that's
heard
right?
anything about that. I just know that because of the societal pressures that the birth rate is just declining. No one wants to have kids, it's too difficult. Um, or I've heard stories of people not wanting to have kids because of the system that they grew up in. They don't want children to grow up in that either. Um, I haven't heard too much about the sterilization, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially because of how fast uh, the Korean society grew from the 70s until the early 2000s. I mean, the way their economic system just skyrocketed caused a huge change, and it was almost. I actually had a conversation with a friend the other day about this. We think it was actually too quick, which caused a lot of the issues in the system now, and why it has so many issues is because of it happened too quickly. The society changed and developed too rapidly for its own
Yeah.
good.
How do you see this manifesting? The fact that it developed too quickly.
And I think there's just going to be a continuation of issues, and until some government comes up with the best solution, I think there's going to be too much back and forth that it's almost going to go backwards.
Okay.
I've noticed that, yeah, there's a lot of societal issues that are almost going backwards in time, because people seek that sort of comfort in that regulation that was around years ago. They don't want too much almost freedom to make their own decisions because I think they worry that they will slowly start to die out, which will happen if the birth rate continues to just drop.
Yeah, I mean, it has actually recovered in the last 2 years, just very slightly.
Yeah.
But apparently that's because there was an increase in the birth rate, or like a couple of years of high births between 1991 and 1995, which was when I think the sterilization was ended, and then people had like more kids. But in general, the conservative estimate is that I think until 2100, the population is going to shrink to one third of its current size. And for every South Korean now, if you take the birth rate, there will be, for every 100 South Koreans now, there will be six great grandchildren, which is
Wow.
94% collapse within 3 generations, which is, yeah, which is insane, and which is also sad because it seems like South Korean culture has brought a lot to the world, right?
Mm,
And yeah, hearing that echoed from you, that you say, okay, if you see this here, and if there's no change, then they're really gonna have big problems. How
yeah.
how does this low birth rate manifest in like everyday life? Where do you see it showing up?
Well, one thing that I have heard about, I am very lucky with the area that I work in. We don't have issues with having students because this is such a like a richer area. Um, People have families, people have children because they can afford it, and they're likely the ones that are trying to continue it or have the pressure to. But I've heard stories of schools closing down. Schools don't have enough students, or they don't have hard enough curriculum, so the kids that are there are being taken to other ones. Um, there's certain areas where it's very heavily dense with students, and certain areas where you'll see no one. I was talking to someone a few weeks ago that lives outside of Seoul, um, and that area is really struggling. They're struggling because of the low birth rate. They don't have enough people being born there, and if they are, they're moving into Seoul. So everything is moving into this one area, and these smaller places in Korea are suffering because everyone wants to come to Seoul. That's where the money is, that's where the jobs, most of the jobs are, because all of the big companies are here. Samsung is here, Hyundai is here, Lotte is here. So they're all in this one pocket. So a lot of places in Korea are suffering for it because they're much older generations now and not enough young generations. So you really observe it. If you leave Seoul, you can see how some areas are really suffering with such low birth rates.
We've talked before about, the high cost of education and the high cost of living. Are there any other like explanations for the low birth rate that you've observed in everyday life, or that you see mirrored, or that you heard from your friends and your coworkers?
I'm not sure where it comes from, but there just seems to be a lot, like a lack of desire to start a family in Korea. I'm not quite sure why. People just sort of are like, I don't want kids. They don't want them. They would rather just kind of live very individual, have the life that they want. I don't know whether they see it as a burden. I don't know whether it is the cost. Some people, they're like, it's not the cost. I've got money. They just don't want to get married. They don't want to settle down. Then they don't want to have kids. There's quite a few people that are like that. I've even got friends that are foreigners who love living in Korea, want to live here long term, but don't want to get married and don't want to have kids. They just want to do their own thing for the rest of their life.
What's interesting is that one of the best predictors of families, or in this case, a woman having a child, is if someone in her vicinity recently had a child. So
Mm,
there was this study I think it was done in a work context, and I think there was I can't remember the exact number, but basically, when a coworker had a child, the chance that other female coworkers had a child would go up quite significantly, because
mm,
you see how it is when a child comes into the world, and it's yeah, it's mimetic desire. We want what we see other people have, and if
mm.
there's less kids, then you have less of this effect, less of this. I see, oh, she has a child, that's amazing. And obviously, you probably see more of the good stuff than the bad stuff when you're observing someone
Yeah.
has a child. So the effect might even be stronger because you see more good than bad. And so maybe this contributes as well, that you have less kids or less mothers who have then this effect on other mothers, or on other potential
Mm.
mothers. Would you mentioned that foreigners also, come to Korea and say, okay, I would want to live here, but I don't want to have kids. Would you want to have kids in this culture, in this climate? I know it's very personal, and you can answer this however you like, but I'm just very interested.
I think I did once upon a time. Originally, I thought, I this something I could do. I think I would be open to it, but I definitely would have a much more different stance to other people. If I were to have a child in this culture, I would not be sending them to that many after school classes or taking them to international schools at 5 years old. There are mothers who will move. I had a student move to Malaysia this last year, only with his mother because he was going to an international school. So his father still lives in Korea, but they live in Malaysia for him to go to international school. It's I would have a child in the system, but I wouldn't raise them this way.
Okay.
But the longer I'm here and the longer I'm teaching in the system, it does make me think if I have children, I really don't know if it would be here in Korea if that pressure was put on me as well, even as a foreigner. It's just, it is quite terrifying to watch, and it makes you kind of second guess whether having children is a good idea with so much pressure. You would think they're going to fall behind, and that's scary to think about.
Yeah, I imagine it would be.
Yeah.
And having observed the change in yourself since you arrived in Korea, do you think that would change again when you, for example, would go back to New Zealand, or do you plan to go back?
I currently plan to go back. That might change, but actually, part of the reason I do think about going back is because I want a family.
Oh yeah.
And the idea of raising a child in, say, the New Zealand system or even any other system feels a lot more comforting than raising a child in this system. Um, it just sort of, if I have a child, I want them to have a much more free upbringing, especially until they develop their own understanding of what they enjoy. I took ballet for years. But I was the one who asked my mum, "Can I go take ballet classes?" And she said no until a friend's mother convinced her. Whereas if I raised a child in the Korean system, it's like you're shoving them into any activity to try and find what they're good at before they can make their own decision.
Yeah, the question I keep asking myself is like, where does this eventually lead to when you have generations upon
Yeah.
generations of adults who have known nothing but academic pressure and who are being judged on well, on observable numerical metrics more probably than any other country.
Mm.
If, let's say, if you were president of South Korea and your primary objective would be to increase the birth rate to prevent the country from declining, from your lived experience, what would you do?
Oh, it would have to be something to do with the education system. It would take a long time. I think people would fight back, even though it is something that they don't like. I know people would fight back, but there has to be more regulation around schooling. It might even threaten English teachers. I mean, it might even be. I know in China they actually they've taken away private English academies. You can't have an English academy that's not within the school system anymore. I think they need to do that here, honestly. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive saying that as an English teacher, but I really think they should be focusing on what they do at school in their elementary and their middle school should be their primary education, not these hagwons. Because one of the issues that they have is they have to send them to these after school hagwons because the teachers just assume they know it now at elementary schools. And that's including math, science, everything. They're not actually learning in school, they're just kind of like revising. So if you don't go to these after school hagwons, you don't know. You might not know and you won't be able to learn. So they almost need to have much tighter regulations on these after school systems or get rid of them to make sure that those schools, those elementaries, middles, high schools are more traditional and you're learning at school, not after school. Give children more freedom to learn and grow and find what they enjoy because then you have a much more flourishing environment. You have an ecosystem of different jobs, not just engineers and doctors and uh, you know, just you have more because it creates so much societal pressure to be perfect. It's even why there's so much you have to be perfect even the way you look to get a job. So people will have so many plastic surgeries so that they look good enough so on their or they edit their photos so that when they go to get hired you're the one that they want to hire because you look good enough, not just because your education is good but because you look good. They need to just focus on students being students, not that being their life though. That's what I would do. I would get rid of all of this after school nonsense almost.
So it's yeah, it's a mix between culture and policy that you would attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think South Korea also has the highest suicide rate in the developed world. And when I hear you talk about this academic pressure, both in school and like in kindergarten, and the pressure to be perfect, to look perfect, to make your family proud, to never upset anyone, it doesn't surprise me in a way.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. It's very high. It's even teachers, Korean teachers at elementary schools or middle schools. I think a few years ago, within the space of like a few months, there were three teachers that committed suicide because of the parent bullying. So it's both this student pressure, but then also the parent pressure. There's all this fighting almost that happens constantly, and it's not talked about enough for, our own comfort level. I'm not sure why, but yeah, it's almost hidden
Yeah.
in the system, and it's all word of mouth.
We've talked a lot about, the flaws and the downsides and the issues with the birth rate and with the education system and all that stuff. Are Koreans hopeful about the future of their country? What do they think when they look ahead?
I don't think some of them do look ahead. I think they look ahead for so long when they're younger and their families look ahead for the kids. But then once they get a job, it's just day to day. A lot of Koreans that I've talked about, it is just day to day. They're like, I gotta work, I go home, or I go out and have dinner and drinks with my friends, and then I go to work again. It's a lot of just, how can I build money and live and then move on? There's not always a lot of that future talk. When they're younger, when they're in high school, there's that, what university am I going to get into? When they're in university, it's what job am I going to get? How am I going to get the best job? But then once they get the job, there's not much future planning anymore. It's like they've done so much that it just stops. They don't want to think about it anymore, which I think might be why they don't want to have kids. They don't want to think about the future anymore. They're like, I
Yeah,
don't have to think anymore. I'm done.
that's interesting what you say. Yeah, basically that they've been pressured and that they have been conditioned to perform and to do something for their future self for such a long time that they've basically given up their childhood, which, in the Western narrative is like this, magical
Yeah.
time of play and of freedom and of exploration, and that they've been forced, because they don't really have a choice in the matter, to give up that time. That then once they hit the thing, once they get the thing that they've been always conditioned to want, the job, the promotion, the position, the money, that then they're like, okay, I need to do me. I need to, I have
Yeah.
this thing that I've worked for 20, 25 years. I don't want to look ahead again. I don't want to sacrifice again for the sake of someone else. Okay. This is something that I haven't thought about. This is an angle huh,
Yeah, it's quite,
that's
I mean,
interesting.
sometimes I see it and I'm like, it makes sense. I mean, I think if you have so much pressure on you, you don't want to think anymore. I think also there might even be for some people, you're so focused on that one thing. If you don't get that one thing, it's kind of like, I don't know what to do anymore. I mean, I even had that a little bit myself, but I didn't have as much pressure. I mean, I danced for years and I thought, I'm going to be a professional ballerina. That didn't happen because I stopped. Even I was a bit like, I don't know how to think about the future anymore. I just won't do anything. So sometimes I think maybe if they don't get into these top universities or don't get that top job, they're kind of like, well, I don't know what to do because that was all I ever worked towards. They're like, that's all I ever needed. What is the plan? And you really do see it. You talk about it with people and they're like, yeah, I went to this university. That's all they can talk about is what university they went to, or what job they have. There's not much else that they're like almost proud about. It always has to be that education or how much money they earn.
I mean, in that way, hearing you say that basically that's the only thing that matters, it seems like family could also almost be the solution to that, because that gives people another factor to which to define themselves by. Right? I think people who move through life and who are very resilient, like one way to move through life and to be resilient is to have several areas of self-definition, right? So for example, you have your job, you have your friendships, you have your family, and maybe you have a hobby. And then when things don't go so well at your job, maybe your family can support you, or your friends, or you had a big success in like a sport you pursue. And when maybe you have family trouble, then other things go well. And so that always you have a bit of you have a safety net, because you've defined yourself by more than one thing. And so if you say, okay, they only define themselves by their career and by their university, then family could almost be the solution because it gives people a secondary purpose and a secondary source of meaning. Do you
Yeah.
think that's do you think that's fair? That's a good assessment, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think, especially in Western culture, you're raised to have those things, have those interests to it's not just about your career, it is about family and friendships, expanding that. Um, but it's almost like it stops in Korea. There are people that do have that very much, like family is important, but it's almost, I wonder whether the fear that your family won't be what your grandparents want or what your parents want, that kind of stops them from doing it. And it kind of is this weird, you're meant to have it, but then it's the fear of it not being perfect enough or the societal pressure of it. Because there's even the issues with famous like celebrities like idols. They get in so much they get so much hate if they have a relationship. So they're almost have this pressure that they're not
Oh
allowed to date,
wow.
they're not allowed to get married or have children because it inhibits their career, and fans will create issues because there's this image, like especially male groups. Females are like, he's mine. It's this like weird internet
Okay.
relationship, parasocial relationship. So those idols then can't really go date because the people that they date will get hate, will get stalked, will get people, sending them death threats. So those people are in danger. So idols can't date, actors can't date. Some will, they will eventually, but they almost have to wait till their 40s and they're out of their career. So you've got those
Yeah.
people. There's just so much different things that almost inhibit anyone from having a proper, like, multi level of success. It has to be one or the other. It has to be family or it has to be career. It can't really be multiple things.
Yeah. So that I understand correctly, basically you have like male, pop icons or celebrities, and part of their marketability is that women picture themselves with them or project, think, oh, he's gonna love me, and once they are in a relationship, that pillar of marketability falls away, and they're not gonna be as popular, so yeah, they're not allowed to do that. Yeah, and then also, yeah, I think you're right. That reinforces that. I recently heard a theory that when Taylor Swift becomes a mother and has her first child, that's going to cause a baby boom in America.
I
because
wouldn't be
someone,
surprised.
because someone of that high profile and that popular with women will basically, um, yeah, make motherhood a bit more like more cool, or whatever you want to call it again.
Yeah.
And if that's true, if you would accept that to be somewhat accurate, then you could also go the other way. And I think this goes back to what we said earlier, or what I brought up earlier with the spillover effect uh, of one child being born to showing other people how it is that a child is around, and the lack of popular icons with children might contribute to that.
There's almost like I've seen it with a few female artists in Korea. They have a child and it's almost okay, we're not interested, we'll move on to the next person. They become less
Okay.
popular. So if these artists actually have families, it's like, oh, they're gonna spend too much time on their child, we'll move to another one. So instead of it being like, oh, they've had a child, that's so cute, I wonder like what it's like. They're gone from society. They don't want it almost. It's quite fascinating.
It really shows up in so many facets and in so many areas of culture. Yeah, I want to get to the bottom of this. Paige, thank you so much for taking the time today. One last question, or two more questions. Um,
Yes.
you said you plan on going back to New Zealand, right?
Yes,
Okay.
likely, yes.
You feel, how do you feel about your time in Korea so far, and how do you look forward to going back? What?
Think I think I almost got roped into the have fun aspect of Korea that a lot of people do. There's a lot to do in Korea, so I think spending my time kind of doing those things that aren't as easily accessible in New Zealand, like sports games are, cheaper here, or it's easier to get to different countries from Korea compared to New Zealand. Um, it, I've kind of joined that lifestyle, and I even sometimes notice myself if I'm here too long being like, yeah, no, it might be okay to not have children and just do whatever I want. Um, but I think for me, I want to do a few more things this year, and then going back to New Zealand really for me is getting a more relaxed job and hopefully eventually starting a family and kind of continuing that lineage wise, continuing my family and doing what I want. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite easy to get roped into that having fun and doing whatever
Okay.
you want kind of
Yeah.
vibe of Korea.
If I would want to find out more about Korea and about the subjects that we talked about, who is the most interesting person that you know that I could speak to?
Ooh, ooh. Trying to think. I feel like a lot of my people that I know, my friends, would probably have similar views to myself. I have a friend who's actually lived here for 5, 6 years now. She probably knows even more than I do. So she could probably speak so much more about it.
Okay.
She's probably lived through a lot more. Um, and potentially my co-teacher, although she might not want to talk about it a lot more. She has a child and she's lived through the whole system of sending her child through the whole system. But yeah, she's got
Okay.
a great outlook too.
Okay. All right, then I might have to, I might want to speak to them. All right, thank you so much. This
No
is great.
worries. Yeah, thank